Many years ago, former wrestling YouTube reviewer Mark Pearson told me that if I was to watch Survivor Series 1998, I would be bearing witness to one of the worst ever made by WWE, then WWF. The thing is, a lot of people who love the Attitude Era also say it's one of the best pay-per-views of the period. So I have two contrasting opinions on the Deadly Game tournament, with me stuck smack bang in the middle of it, trying to ascertain which one is technically correct. So with that in mind, is the Deadly Game as bad as the lover of reverse Rana states, or will the Attitude Era fanboys get a crowning glory to make sure that their statements are backed up to the hill? The only way to find out is to delve headfirst into it and see what I can dig up for myself, as we try and survive the May 2018 Friday Flashback review. Before we get started, I have to make note of a few little tidbits you may find interesting. First of all, if you decide to watch this, or have watched it, on the WWE Network, you're going to get some censorship regarding the initials of WWF, which is weird considering the logo is uncensored, and the use of the World Wrestling Federation name is uncensored. Which is quite weird, because it's also really indiscriminate, because early on in the evening, Finkel, King and JR got censored whenever they mentioned the name, whilst later on in the evening, no one seemed to care. It felt really jarring and made the whole evening difficult to sit through because you kind of notice these things after a while. On top of that, this was of course the final pay-per-view before JR's first Bell's palsy attack, which he suffered at the Capital Carnage pay-per-view in the UK a couple of weeks later, which when you look back on this period and then look forward to 1999, 2000, you can really hear a difference. The style of his commentary and exuberance and passion is still there, but it's the clarity of it. You can really notice the difference, and I've got to say, after watching most of my life with post-Bell's palsy JR and occasionally watching old pay-per-views from 1997, 1996, 1998, and it not really becoming much apparent to me, the fact that I've just noticed and realised that is quite ridiculous. And it highlights that some people just forget these things. We're wrestling fans, we have a lot of information to store in our brains, it's understandable. Now let's get on to the pay-per-view at hand here, because there's a lot to get through, because the people in the audience in the Kegel Center in St. Louis, Missouri on this night, all 21,000 of them, had to sit through 4 matches on Heat before getting through 14 matches on the main card. This was a tiring night, and I think they got their money's worth in the end of the day, but seriously? That's ridiculous. The fact of the matter is, all the first round matches had a 10-minute time limit, as Mankind came out to get a hand-picked opponent from Vince McMahon. Of course, he was the chosen one that Vince had picked to go and win it all at the time, which of course wouldn't be the case by the end of the night. We'll get to that later on. As of course only winners advance in this tournament, Mankind was given a hand-picked opponent that would be easy for him to beat. Now, a lot of people thought it would be Shawn Michaels, returning from his back injury. They were chanting HBK before the announcement of Dwayne Gill was put forward to the audience. Of course, Dwayne Gill, the man of part of the Job Squad, who had become Gilbert and light heavyweight champion in the year following, as he was beaten in 30 seconds in a match that really constituted nothing at all and gets a 0 rating for reasons you can probably understand, because this match was nothing. Not to mention, I also got annoyed with the soppy piano music that played after every single victory Mankind got in this tournament. It was really, really quite strange. Either way, we move on to the next match without a care in the world, because seriously, I'm not going to care about any match that gets a 0 lasting only 30 seconds. Let's move on to Jeff Jarrett versus Al Snow, as Jarrett, despite all the confidence in the world, could not escape the destruction of Head. And though that isn't a euphemism, that's a legitimate thing I can say, because it's a wrestling video from the Attitude Era. Hooray! And the fact is, Al Snow won in a paltry 3 minutes and 31 seconds as a plane flies over this place, much to the dismay of King and Deborah in a match that I actually gave 1 star to. Now, these two had a lot of beef going into the match as they had been at each other's throats, since Snow cost Jarrett Barrett the Intercontinental Championship a few months earlier. So the aggression and desire for one-upsmanship here to ensure that either man would get a shot at a title they never would have gotten otherwise was warranted, and it meant that this incredibly short match felt like it got what it could in the time allotted to it. Now sure, it was way too fast with so much momentum shifting that neither man looked like they could get a shoe in at all. A decent if conservative reaction and minimal psychology distractions meant that it wasn't the most spectacular of matches, but it was still somewhat enjoyable, especially that the most popular guy won on this case. And he also won with the weapon of choice that everybody loved, because what does everybody want? Head, apparently. Logically. Now, they put in a solid performance, and the fact is it was enjoyable enough for me to hold it above the precipice of extremely terrible matches. For the time it had, it was okay. I mean, that doesn't really say much, but it was a lot better than I expected given what they had to work with, and I can say without any problems that that's a positive thing, even though the match quality itself doesn't reflect very well. Next up, in the next round of tournament matches, we saw Stone Cold Steve Austin advance, but not without taking a beating, as the corporation's lackey, the Big Boss Man, served him a nightstick hit or two to ensure the W was well in the Texas Rattlesnakes column, but Vince McMahon was cackling, realising he may not come out for the rest of the evening, and he gets what he wants, a main storyline of screwing the Rattlesnake finally out of the WWF Championship. Ooh. Now this was a half-a-star match that went just about as long as the match that preceded it. Now, obviously the ramifications of this story-wise, having Austin being taken out by McMahon's heavy and serving intensity and pace to ensure the crowd was reasonably vocal for it, for their anti-authoritarian hero, was good. That was all that the match had though, as it could have lasted a bit longer to really draw out some tension and make it worth its weight. Unfortunately, with Bossman taking control and making it very one-sided, leading to that DQ as Austin tried to rise back up, it meant that the match was not entertaining in the slightest, even though it served its purpose wholeheartedly. So yeah, I have to point this out as being quite a poor experience, even though also that it subverted some rules, which made it even worse. I know, for storyline reasons, the Big Boss Man can survive hitting someone in the nuts and getting no DQ for it, so good on him. I just felt that even though a lot happened in this match that made sense, it didn't create a good experience to watch, and as a result, half a star is warranted, even though it had implications for the rest of the evening it had. Next up, we saw a match that made Vince McMahon very unhappy, as Stone Cold Steve Austin received a bye through to the semi-finals. Why? Because Real Man's Man Steven Regal and X-Pac, the European champion of DX, fought to a double countout after 8 minutes and 26 seconds of what was quite a decent match, I would say. The thing is though, Commissioner Slaughter wanted to avoid this by restarting the contest, but by that point X-Pac was being taken away by the referees because he was injured, suffering from a neck and back issue, whilst William Regal decided to run after his rival, who he believed should not be holding the European Championship because he's not European, and decided to give him a bit more of a beating backstage, which resulted in the match being thrown out, and because only winners advance, neither man did, and Austin got a free route to the semis, which pissed off Vince, even though watching two burly men fight would probably give him a semi. Regardless of that crude image I've just put in your head, let's look at this 1.5 star match, which at this point in the evening was the best thing that this night had going for it. Because considering the clash in styles between a high-flying light heavyweight and a stocky bruising submission specialist, I was fully expecting this to not hit the mark. Given the time constraints of just 10 bloody minutes, I was really not sure how it would satisfy the expectation I had, because I know these two are good wrestlers, and I knew if they went at it, they'd work. So, where else could this have gone, right? Well, it surprisingly meshed well together as momentum shifted, allowing equal offense from both men, but remained consistent in Regal's corner as he had a favoured ground game to wear down the European champion, and it did so with gusto, focusing on the neck and back as he ensured the Regal stretch would have been a right endgame for the DX military soldier. Military soldier in the loosest possible term you can ever think of. Now, the fact is, these two are building up tension to where X-Pac was about to come up on a massive revival. Unfortunately, if they'd given it, another minute and a half or so, reaching the 10-minute mark where one of these could expire and neither man would have went through that way, it would have made more sense. convoluting a double countout just kind of ruined this match, and it could have reached 2, maybe 2.5 star territory, and that was really starting to build up excitement. It was irritating, and it ruined the end of this contest as the crowd was starting to get behind X-Pac, who they were waning at this point in time because late 1998, he wasn't that over at all. The fact is, it could have been a great match. Instead, we've got a decent, okay, good one. It's not the best thing in the world, but considering what we had here, it exceeded my expectations and delivered what it could in the time allotted, which is not the same as the Al Snow Jeff Jarrett match, but the fact is, this was entertaining. I just wish it ended on a much more comprehensive note, otherwise, it could have achieved far more than what we actually got delivered here. And next we have the real clash of stars. The 1998 King of the Ring and the reigning Intercontinental Champion Ken Shamrock made Goldust tap the ankle lock after the Golden One was being stopped from hitting the Shattered Dreams, allowing an opening for the world's most dangerous man, I should say, to get an advantage and make him tap out to get 1 star for this match's efforts after 5 minutes and 56 seconds of action. Now, it was a match that promised a lot, but it didn't really give me that much in return, to be perfectly honest. Shamrock went for a quick victory, which was his hard-hitting offense, as you would expect, but it settled into methodically breaking Goldust down, which meant that the match was surprisingly one-sided, slower than you would think it would be, and honestly, quite flat. The crowd didn't really care, to be perfectly honest, and they had a few times where they peaked up for Goldust's offense and Shamrock beat the crap out of somebody, because logically they would. But the fact that it relied on Goldust rarely doing much meant that there wasn't much excitement to be had. And there was a few valiant fight back, sure, but it wasn't much to go on. The crowd liked Shamrock, but they couldn't be decided on which man they wanted to support here, as there wasn't much presence to the bout as a whole, as I've already noted. And it made the time drag and hurt it considerably, along with the horrible pace it gave to itself. It was quite a slog. And okay, it lasted as long as it could have without going overboard, meaning I was even more infuriated as I could be, but fact is, it just wasn't the match I thought it would be. Shamrock's resourcefulness won in the match off a sloppy but interesting Hurricane Rana, which really rose my eyebrows, but by that point in the match, it was too damn late. I already knew that the match had not really lived up to the hype it would have been given, considering these two are pretty good in the ring, and with the right enthusiasm behind it, it could have been a really good match, but that's the problem with a tournament like this. The matches don't last very long, they haven't got a lot of foundations to make them any good, and you can kind of see where I'm going with that. It's not that great. And sure, there was a signature move to cap off what little imagination this match had, but that's it really. It could have been half a star, but I was relatively kind because it did all it needed to be somewhat enjoyable. Somewhat. But it couldn't escape the realm that the other matches had gained on this card thus far. Which means we go into the next match thinking, The Rock vs Triple H. This should be more up our street. Unfortunately, we were disappointed because, of course, if you think back to the SummerSlam 1998 review I did quite a long time ago, it's in the Friday Flashback playlist, linked in the description and on the main channel page if you want to check that out. I'll see the difference in how I did things back when I made that. The fact of the matter is, Triple H won the IC title from The Rock in a ladder match, and he then had to forfeit said belt, leading to the IC title tournament, which Ken Shamrock won. And of course, he was thought to be coming back in time for this tournament. Unfortunately, he couldn't, which led to, well, The Rock taking on the Big Boss Man instead, a opponent handpicked by Vince McMahon to replace the Game, who was going, or the person who was soon to be the Game, I should say, who was going to be fined heavily by Mr. McMahon the minute he returned to action. The thing is, you'd think The Rock would be up against it. Oh no, he wasn't, because he rolled up Bossman in a small package and won in 4 seconds. Which, at the time, was the shortest match in WWE history, beaten out a year or two later by William Regal vs Spike Dudley, which lasted 3 seconds, logically. Now, if I gave The Rock's 7-second bout with Eric Rowan at WrestleMania 32 a 0 and counted it towards the show, then I'm definitely going to do the same for this one, much like the 30-second Mankind match we got. There isn't much to make note of here. I already highlighted the Triple H issue. The fact is, the other one is that we got to see the Stooges, Briscoe and Patterson, come out to DX's music doing crotch chops, which made me laugh my arse off. And on top of that, we also got to hear Briscoe basically doing what he does and calling Vince Mr. McMahon, which I already noted. He said that like 5 or 6 times. I pissed myself laughing. It was awesome. And now I can't stop calling Mr. McMahon, because it's so ridiculously funny. I don't know, that made the match somewhat happy for me. I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. But at the same time, for technical reasons, according to my criteria, the match cannot gain more than a 0, for obvious reasons you should know by now. Because if a match goes for little time with no real substance, then logically it's not going to get anything, is it? Oh boy, the fact is, I had a good laugh at this, and we then had to move on to the next contest, which of course allowed us to witness the first quarter-final match, which of course the time limits got increased to 15 minutes because we are lucky people, as The Undertaker defeated his brother Kane off a tombstone piledriver in a 7-minute and 20-second match that saw the Paul Bearer interference lead to that, which is really strange. It was a 3/4 star match. I say it's really strange because if you had watched this 1998 SummerSlam and the review of that I had, and the events leading up to this one, you will note that Kane and Undertaker were on the same team. They shattered Vince's ankle after Breakdown and the whole stuff surrounding Judgment Day, and they were seemingly on the same page after spending most of the last year trying to kill one another. Well, they suffered a double turn between Judgment Day and this show, because The Undertaker decided to reunite with Paul Bearer, the man, again, like I said, who had been trying to torture him for the last year, and turn heel, meaning that Kane was now a babyface, and it was all sorts of weird, and it really was... Even looking back on it, I cannot believe such a thing even came to pass, but the Attitude Era. It means a year's worth of storytelling went out the fucking window. And it meant that this matchup had no real enthusiasm for it to happen in the first place. And it reminded me something else that Mark Pearson put out in many of his reviews looking at pay-per-views 10 years prior or whenever events happened. He always said that every time The Undertaker and Kane fought, the build-up was always great, but the matches always left a lot to be desired. Well, I agree with him, because I gave the WrestleMania 14 match in a review I've done off of this show and the channel in total a 1-star rating. Do you know what that means? That this match barely even managed to get near that. Okay, it was solid in pace. Momentum shifts though were inconsequential, the fans were on their feet occasionally but not much to impact it all, and while Taker attacked the leg of Kane to wear his little brother down, it didn't factor into how the story much. Meaning that everything that happened here was inconsequential. Now sure, the interference by Paul Bearer at the end gave some storyline implications for later down the line, which is lovely. But outside of that, a small bit of crowd reaction and it going a decent length for what it was, this match really was a very fickle piece of business, and inevitably it gets the rating it bloody deserves. It would have been half a star if not for that interference, which shows how bad the match was, but in total also highlights just how much of a difference little things can make to a really terrible match. Because you can go from a 0 to a 1 star pretty bloody quickly if the foundations of your contest works. In this case, well, it almost managed to, but only by the skin of its bloody teeth. I expected a bit more from these two, and what we got was something that was easily able to be thrown away. That also being said, Undertaker went through the semis. Pretty damn solid. As we move on to another contest, which I had a lot of expectations for but was summarily disappointed, as Mankind advanced to the semi-finals against Al Snow, winning off the Mandible Claw with Socko in tow in just under 4 minutes, and it received, much like the other matches, around half a star. The match was centered around Mr. Socko being used as a headband by Head, as a way to get the stinky Socko away from Foley in order to make him presentable to Mr. McMahon, because he doesn't like Socko, he finds it horrible. So we decided to wrap it around Head and make Al Snow a victim of all the consequences that were happening around Mankind and Vince McMahon, which is understandable. And it meant that while Foley started off as regular in his contest as you would expect, he then switched up, found Socko on Head, beat the crap out of Head, strapped it around his arm, and then choked Snow out. And also hit him with a chair a few times because he was that bloody pissed off, showing the sadistic side of Mankind was still technically there. And while that was good, and while that got the crowd on their feet and sped things up from a quite slow pace considerably, it at least gave this match something to cheer for. But much like the prior matches, it was really meagre outside of that. There was no real substance to what was going on in the ring, and it was just easily ignorable. And the fast pace was lovely. It helped make things go a little bit further and make my interest tick over a little better, but the match overall just didn't really bring the house down like many would have expected. These two have a long history in ECW where violence could have been around it. Of course, Foley was Hardcore Champion at this point, the inaugural Hardcore Champion, of course being presented by Vince McMahon not long before this show happened. So you would have thought that, hey, bend the rules a little bit. Mankind can get away with not being DQ'd with weapon usage. Make this match a bit more violent. Make it last a bit longer. Make it feel like Mankind actually has to fight for something. But of course, he's Vince McMahon's lackey in this case, meaning he can get away with pretty much anything and the matches don't last long at all. Half a star is what we get, but it showed, like I've mentioned many times, that the matches on this pay-per-view don't really serve a purpose, and we get stuff like this. We're 8 matches in, people, and we still have quite a few to get through before this night is over. All I'm saying is, it better improve, otherwise I'm going to be rating this pay-per-view as badly as Mark Pearson did all those years back. The fact of the matter is, we now reach the final quarter-final, a match that I'm really interested in, because the corporation's plan to get The Rock away from that main event as much as Stone Cold Steve Austin backfired, as the People's Champion defeated longtime rival Ken Shamrock following a nightstick to the skull after a respectable and quite good 2-star match that lasted 8 minutes and 20 seconds. Now these two have been fighting for the majority of 1997, back when The Rock was with The Nation. So you can kind of see where the intensity came from here, because it all made storyline sense, as well as the fact The Rock, who had been basically Shamrock's bitch throughout the entirety of the feud, meant that he could finally get the victory that he most definitely needed to put all of the mid-card scene behind him, as he was certainly going to go into main event territory, and it was a nice feather into the Great One's cap, for sure. The physicality and awareness of each other had their attacks being countered as exciting twists came around really quite well, as Rock asserted dominance with Shamrock able to counteract with periods of pressuring aggression. The crowd loved Rock, hated Shamrock, and then loathed the Boss Man coming out, to where his appearance just made everything go up a little in stakes here. It added power to proceedings with both men countering and kicking out of finishes, meaning you weren't really sure who was going to win here, and of course it was a 15-minute time limit, meaning this could have gone on a lot longer for me, meaning it felt a bit rushed, but the finish was glorious, because neither man was going to lay down, so it took a misguided throw of the nightstick, which was caught by The Rock instead of Shamrock, to get the victory for The Rock. And inevitably, you'd be thinking at the time, oh, it's another backfired plan for the corporation. Well, by the end of the night, you'd see why that isn't the case, but that being said, this is the first match I'd gotten since Regal and X-Pac that actually made me smile. So I was thinking, this match did what it needed to do. It threw a spanner in the works of all plans, and it gave The Rock a victory that everybody wanted to see him get. And it was done through nefarious means, but it was done in a way that made Vince McMahon squirm. They could not have done that better, and okay, it could have been a lot longer, and it could have not been as methodical as it needed to be in places to build that tension up. It could have been a lot more intense, but I will take what I can. A 2-star match on a pay-per-view that has barely even given me much shout about is a good thing, and I should revel in it. Which is definitely the case as we look forward to the rest of the tournament. But before we do that, we have to go into a break, as the Deadly Game's tense grasp on this event subsides as we allow the WWF Women's Championship match to take centre stage, as Sable captured the belt, defeating Jacqueline off a Sable Bomb in 3 minutes and 14 seconds, which got a surprising 1-star rating from me. The crowd were hot for Sable, obviously, as you would expect, and I mean, up until Brock Lesnar tied the knot, who wouldn't be hot for her? Me. Sorry, not my thing really. The fact is though, regardless, it was the linchpin that helped the minimal interference with Mark Miro, the blindsiding and the powerful comeback, as well with a solid pace to make it look much better than an Attitude Era women's match we'd later seen would be. Now of course the title was brought back a few months ago, Sable got screwed out of it, and Jacqueline was the brand new champion, so Sable was going to have to win it at some point. She won it comprehensively, put Miro down at the same time, and it did its job as a match. It was quick as blue hell, but what it had was decent, to where I could see past the obvious constraints of it all and say it was worth the time. And Sable got the reaction she bloody deserved as she was now on top of the damn world with the title that Vince McMahon brought back to capitalise on her popularity. Can't go wrong with that, can you, when all is said and done? And the fact is, when you think about it, Sable was the second most popular person, or third most popular person, outside of DX and Stone Cold at this time. What a crazy world to have lived in back in 1998. We return to the deadly game after that short break, with a twist in proceedings being executed, as Shane McMahon, the person who hired Austin back with a contract a month or two prior, stuck his middle fingers up to the rattlesnake, whilst Vince, Briscoe and Patterson all laid in, allowing Mankind to win in the semi-final after 10 minutes and 27 seconds to advance to the final that many had predicted he'd reach, through obvious nefarious means of course. And this matchup was the best of the night at this point, with 2.5 stars. This was a fun match, a match that JR would call a slobber knocker, because it had all the ingredients for it. Austin being beaten up earlier on in the evening, coming out of Hell's Gate with reckless abandon, wanting to beat up a corporation's lackey that he could actually get his hands on. The fact that both of these two wailed into each other with Mankind using all he could to try and get above the rattlesnake, but then trying to retreat in fear, realising that up until this point, he had it easy. No one was out for his blood. And logically, the match went on quite tensely, because you weren't sure who was going to interfere, what was going to happen, how was Austin going to go against the tide that was well and truly pinning him against the wall, and how was Mankind, if he was going to win, actually doing it. It meant the crowd was on their feet for quite a long duration. The match had a reckless and intense pace that didn't let up until towards the end of the match, and inevitably on top of that, you got the screwy finish that just tied the story together. Now, of course, this match had no body psychology, despite the fact that Austin got his hand beaten into him with a nightstick. The problem is, with that, it means that it loses a bit of factor on my end. But the story did its job. You had McMahon prove that he's healed by taking Kyoto out of proceedings. You had the Shane McMahon interference, which of course was a massive heel turn, which no one saw coming, proving that he wasn't just the lowly referee, that this was all a big ruse to get Austin completely and utterly screwed, which is strange. I would have just left him be fired and get arrested for all the trespass he was doing, but that's by the by. Not just that, Patterson and Briscoe did their job too. Inevitably, Mankind, against all logic, got the victory that he really didn't deserve, and the crowd were pelting rubbish at the corporation as they ran into a limo to escape. Their job done. The match lasted a little too long for what I was liking, and the finish was a little sloppy, because Briscoe and Patterson, or Mankind, they all missed their cues, and Austin was waiting around a little too long, and you could tell it wasn't supposed to end as jarringly as that. But that was a low point that took away from what was a pretty decent match. If it wasn't for those two things, we'd be looking at a 3-star match here. It had all it needed story-wise, with no body psychology, and the crowd, and the excitement, and the pace, and the length. I mean, it could have gone a bit longer if it wanted to, but that would have tired the crowd out. So logically, they did what they had to do. If it hadn't have ended as badly as it did, and could have been a slight bit shorter, with less methodical areas in it, building up that tension, which is a problem that's happened all bloody evening, because they seem to come out of nowhere for no due purpose, this match would have been a better thing than it already is. The fact that we got an average match on a night that has not even delivered me that, pretty much, is a good thing. However, by this point, 10 or 11 matches into a 14-match card, my energy was waning quite considerably, so it would need to be a lot of good things to get the crowd and me back on even keel. This got the crowd back on even keel and then some. But for me, I was starting to get a bit jaded. So what did the next match do to get me in the mood? Well, it was a boring Rock vs Undertaker match as the other semi-final ended under equally controversial circumstances. The Rock made it through quite an atrocious half-star rated bout after Bossman and Kane got involved to send him to the big money match. But 8 minutes and 23 seconds that preceded all that wasn't really to my liking, because I've seen Taker and Rock fight before with more urgency and purpose, and this wasn't an example of it. Like many of the earlier matches, this is one that didn't have much of a reason to really come through until Bossman and Kane ensured it had a direct consequence to rebound off of it. I mean, it was alright, in that the equal offense both men held to their own, making it somewhat exciting. You weren't entirely sure who was going to win here. But without much meaning or emphasis on it, it really didn't come through like a trailblazer that you would expect it to be. This is a big money match, of course, seemingly in WWE's eyes, yet it went down with as much enthusiasm as a kick to the balls. And I don't like that, especially when you've got two good wrestlers in there. You don't want to do that. And it seemed like this match was all about the finish, as Bossman tried to screw the Rock again, but got a massive helping hand as Kane screwed Taker to further push their rivalry past the point of no return. This match was a letdown given the hype that we had been put into it. Despite the fact I had little to work with, I should have been not as disappointed as I was, but here we are. The result of what we give this, and what the match had, was of no surprise at all, as we go on to a break before the main event itself. Before the grand finale, we had a title match to break the ice. A triple threat tag team contest, to be precise, for the WWF Tag Team Championships, as the New Age Outlaws came out in one piece. They defeated the Headbangers and the crazy duo from the Nation of D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry in 10 minutes and 10 seconds. A match that I gave a 1-star rating to. Sound familiar? I've given it a lot this night. And this is the last one, so wonder what that says for the main event, right? It's either poor or amazing. We'll find out. To call this match frantic, all over the place, and anarchic is an understatement, as it went on far too long. 10 minutes for a quick tag match that should have just been a nice toilet break for the crowd. 10 minutes! This doesn't usually happen in the Attitude Era, let alone Ruthless Aggression, or even now. It's so weird. And sure, it has so many near falls, you think, oh, the dramatic pretense is going to be there. No, they were of little consequence or reason to where this match finished on a whimper coming out of nowhere, despite starting really strong and having the crowd react accordingly, while delivering something really quite quick. It stretched out with good use of rest holds to build tension. However, by the end of it was all a blur and didn't really give you much in return, except for the fact that Road Dogg and Billy Gunn made it out alive, with the controversy going into it surrounding the fact that neither man was legal when they won the titles in the first place, meaning that inevitably they could be pinned here and lose the belts and it would be all above water. They survived like they said they would, and that's perfectly reasonable and fine. The fact is, this occasionally regimented clusterfuck got 1 star. The fact it did is a miracle. And honestly, I'm looking at this contest thinking it was entertaining enough, but for a match in this place on the card, I don't think it was really warranted, and as a result, we have me going into the main event feeling slightly subdued. Well, let's hope the main event can definitely give me what I expect from it. And I'll tell you this, it bloody managed to, as we are guaranteed a new WWF champion in the final of the Deadly Game, and it seemed like Mankind would be getting the job done. One last roll of the controversy dice, however, ensured that it would definitely not work out as we would have thought. Oh no, because a sharpshooter was applied, Vince McMahon rang the bell, and well, you know what that's in reference to, as the corporation crowned a new champion, The Rock. Oh yes it was, putting Foley and the shocked crowd down so hard in the process, they threw trash in the ring, they were pissed off beyond all belief, and the McMahons spent the rest of the night rubbing the crowd's face in it before Austin came down to help the save as Mankind was being brutalized. as the pay-per-view went off the air, making Raw unmissable, considering what had just happened. But the match concluded, as well as the evening, in quite a clunky but very surprising way, as the 14th match on this bumper card was the longest on the night at 17 minutes and 10 seconds, and it achieved the best rating, but not by much, a 2 3/4 star, one to secure to its lapel. Now, all that happened with The Rock all night long was an extremely well executed storyline ruse that really worked, as many people had no idea it was coming on the night. And when you actually look back, knowing all the pieces of that, and see how they were interwoven into the narrative fabric, it's just wonderful. Rock was in on it all along. The small package and the 4-second win earlier, yep, he was in on it, and no one was wise enough to see it. The same with the nightstick assist. That was so well timed that people thought, oh, The Rock just screwed over the corporation again. Boss man's gonna get fired. No, he's not, because it was all the plan. And the fact is, Kane just worked into the hands of the plan by screwing Taker anyway. Boss man didn't need to do a thing. And then we get to here where the disgusted Missouri crowd got the shittest cherry on top of the crap sundae that was this incredible storyline that no one saw coming at all. If you did say you knew this was coming beforehand, you need to be a bloody wizard or having sex with Vince Russo, and I'm pretty sure you want neither of those things. The fact of the matter is, if you were a wizard, you'd be hunted down by people in the US and probably burned at the stake, and what I've just said about Vince Russo should be an indication about how trashy Vince Russo is. That's obviously warranted. The match against all of this was surprisingly very good in trying to obviously keep it under wraps, as The Rock was a wily competitor trying to disadvantage Mankind's potential for victory by brawling all over the place and stopping any of the McMahons or anyone else from getting in the way. He used weapons, but due to the storyline situation he was in, wasn't DQ'd either, which meant that Mankind could get away with it in equal measure, but he wasn't to know. Which meant that there was just that extra layer of weirdness. Why is Rock being allowed to when Mankind is also too? Is the referee losing control? The match just slowly snowballed into chaos as the crowd just lapped it up before this match went into a methodical yet exciting contest of one-upsmanship and a never-say-die attitude that led to kickouts aplenty for every finisher and signature move to really make it look like neither man was going to quit, which made the finish even more apparent, because it meant that, yes, they just threw caution to the wind and went, screw it, we're going to ensure that this match ends with who we want to win, making the screw job look really, really bad in retrospect, while also giving Bret Hart and his Wrestling with Shadows documentary a bird of its own, which is lovely to say the least if you know the history of this type of stuff. The fact is, it was a little slow towards the middle of its runtime and went a little too long in my estimations, despite the fact that there was a springboard elbow included too. There wasn't a lot of stuff to really make it bountiful, to make it 3-star worthy. The fact is though, I expected this match to go the length it did. I just felt that the slower areas, while building a lot of tension and making you really uncertain of whether The Rock or Mankind could get the job done, it kind of meant that the ending and the finisher sequences kind of came out of nowhere. If anyone, however, can complain that nowadays finishers are kicked out of too much, look at this contest. I know some with good reason for storyline purposes, but just saying, people are a little bit forgetful of what the Attitude Era did and can somehow get away with because our fans are jaded now. Regardless of that, this match had a few issues with a little bit of pace, but it lasted the time, it had the crowd on its feet, the story psychology for what we knew and were knowing was there, it had a bit of body working to its own extent, it was exciting, it did its job in being the main event we expected, and it was just a small area away from reaching good, great match territory. It was nearly there. The fact is though, the fans cared enough after waiting that long for this that it made it all worthwhile, despite the fact we had to go through a cumbersome amount of ridiculous matches to reach it, which means at the end of this night, while this match and everything around it pulled on the heartstrings, I have to group all of it together and summarise whether it managed to be good or bad. And based on the ratings I've given, I'm pretty sure you know where that's going to go, as it's time for me to look at my final thoughts on this tournament and judge who, in which camp, was right in the end. I've mentioned already a few times having 14 matches on this card, mostly fall under a unitary purpose with very little value to be found, would mean a lot of people who were watching this show at the time would shake their heads and feel they haven't got their money's worth. Well, I mean, if you're in the Kiel Centre and at home and you get 18 matches for an entire night's worth of entertainment, that's pretty good. But the fact is, I'm certain a lot of people would look at what results were given to us and think, maybe this isn't as good a pay-per-view as you'd probably expect. Given it's the height of the Attitude Era, wrestlers at the top of their powers, you'd think more would be done. That would be definitely the case for the match quality. In case of the storyline implications and the narrative they were weaving, that's a different story, because the breadcrumbs of deceit for The Rock's maiden title victory and the double turn for Mankind and the Stone Cold Steve Austin screw job that happened before that, it all came together so well and it was discreetly hidden to a point where the reaction was so brilliant that inevitably this event did exactly what many people wanted it to do. We saw a twist or turn aplenty on this card that excited and entertained. That is most definitely, if you are coming here to watch how Mankind would make it out alive with the championship, then get surprised that Ronnie Austin was screwed by one heel turn, you then see another one which you didn't even factor in, which had been subtly put in across the entire damn evening, you would be elated, because you then watch Raw the next night and say, you know what? This was worth it. I got entertainment value and I'm excited. However, I review pay-per-views on match quality pretty much unitarily because I don't usually factor in overbearing narratives like this. The fact is I have to because it was so well executed. But of course the match quality is what matters because the pay-per-views are supposed to be the thing that either continues a storyline or ends it. The matches are what do that, and they have to be fueling enough of those narrative fabric into their own proceedings to make it work. And to be blunt, I watched this pay-per-view losing more interest as it went along, realising that a lot of the matches were not up to par, resulting in an event that I really wasn't enjoying that much. Now, while this event had more quality towards its tail end, most of the contests fit around half a star to 1 star territory, meaning the lack of entertainment consistently over the 3 hours painted this event in a very poor light. Now, sure, it paid off when the night was over, but it meant the build-up was filler that was more cumulative scale than usual. I've got to say, the filler felt it was stacked higher than the actual good stuff, on a level I don't usually see often when watching a pay-per-view. And okay, the decent quality matches and the interwoven narratives saved its blushes, but not by much, as Mark Pearson's assertions regarding the event's quality were confirmed, but not as vehemently as he had put it. It has enjoyable moments and it kept me on my toes despite the insane burden that this event had to carry for itself. But it didn't stop me from taking this much hyped event and saying it was disappointing pretty much across the board. I was restless and infuriated at how this event had so many matches with no real body behind them. And ones that didn't either have enough time to make themselves work, or they lacked in creativity to become nothing more than they ended up being. And this leaves me with an event, ladies and gentlemen, that, despite the seismic impact of its shock ending and the proceedings it had, didn't have a lot to fall back on and was quite bad indeed. Meaning that Survivor Series 1998 gets a rating that you may all think is quite harsh, considering it had a really exciting element of storytelling and a nice air about it. But 2.25 out of 10, given the consistent crap matches we got on this card, is well and truly deserved. I'm sorry, this event was quite bad, but not to the point where it joins the absolute worst. December to Dismember, Battleground 2017, and a few others which I'm not going to mention because they don't come to the top of my head here. Actually, you know what? It's like Bad Blood 1997. I projectile my opinion all across the screen for your guys' pleasure. Lord knows. It's like Bad Blood 1997, except the fact it's more consistent given the quality of its matches throughout the evening, instead of having one absolute 5-star classic completely save it from oblivion. Inevitably, it gets right about the same rating though. They may have similar ratings as a result, but the difference between it is apparent. I just hope I've made that clear, as this review reaches its conclusion, and at that note, the Survivor Series 1998 Deadly Game review for the Friday Flashback show is done. It's been a very long one, but when you've had so many matches to get through and all those implications noted, it has to be done as such. What did you all think about this show? Did you enjoy what my opinions put forward, or do you think I'm wrong? As more goes forward to the screen in bountiful, contentful ways. If you liked what you saw here and you want to see more, hit the like button and click the subscribe so you do not miss when next month's Flashback event goes up. Of course, along top of that, you also got the Wrestling Rants reviewing Raw and SmackDown, which of course, if you heard last week's, isn't happening, which is why Friday Flashback is coming in its stead. The fact is, what is next month's Flashback event? Well, I'm going to tell you, it's another Survivor Series. All I'm hoping is it's better than this. Although knowing its history, I'd be stressed to find good positives within it. Let's wait and see. It'll be in June when that comes along, and I hope you will all be there to witness it. I have been Freddie Thomas, you've been people watching. This has been another Friday Flashback pay-per-view review for the CC Network, and I will see you all next time.